Good morning, Obi.
Hi, Greg.
Are you?
Place and purpose.
I see where your hands are. Everyone, it's like really cold here.
Right. Here we are back underneath the bay laurels in a particularly frosty January morning. The first place and purpose of the new year.
Of the new year.
Happy New Year.
The Happy New Year. The oaks are bare and the bays are blooming. And the ground is frozen cold.
Yeah, we still have the frost everywhere. It's a beautiful day though.
And didn't you say where it's this moment in between where you have an atmospheric river coming?
We picked the right weather window to
so
do
we
this
held
today.
back the atmospheric river. The flood is on its way, but we've got our hands are holding it back.
That's right. They're saying that this weekend is going to really has the potential to rival what happened last winter.
Really?
Yeah. So we might actually see some serious precipitation this week.
Wow, I didn't hear that. That's interesting. It'll be we'll have to watch it up here on the mountain and elsewhere because the ground is already saturated from the rains we've already had.
Right.
And when you get heavy rain on saturated ground, that's when you start having mudslides and those kinds of things, floods. So
I wonder too what that's going to do to the fungal pathogenic landscape of sudden oak death.
Well, that's the other thing. I was just telling you before we started that despite what we hear so much about, and we've certainly experienced climate abnormalities around here, but we're having a very typical Sonoma County winter. Wet rain and now some frost. Not quite as much frost as we had 20, 30 years ago, but certainly typical. And one of the problems with that is these wet, winters, basically December through March, and with a lot of the clouds and the fog, it spreads the pathogens. So remember, the beautiful bay trees here are carriers, and they spit it onto or let it transfer onto their neighbors, the oak trees all around us. Redwoods are also carriers. In fact, many trees are carriers of the pathogen. So while we had a respite during the drought of the seeming spread of the disease and the demise of a lot of trees, now we have the climactic conditions for it to continue. So we'll see.
Well, specifically, Phytophthora, the sudden oak fungal genus, resultant now, but I guess 20 years ago or so that sudden oak death really got started. Since then, it's taken 20 million trees or something like
Well, yeah, and as I wrote in my essay, If Oprah Were an Oak Tree, it reminded me the way it kind of came about, much like I remember the experience of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
Because the first year or two, young men were coming in dying, and the doctors didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And it's very analogous to what was happening in Marin County, where you saw patches of trees dying and nobody knew exactly at first what it was. And then they discovered what it was, and even as they discovered it, it just continued to grow. I just wish there were some antiviral that we discovered for AIDS that we could discover for the oak trees.
Right.
Because the only place the analogy stops with the AIDS is we don't have a cure, but we have a way to enable life to go on with that. There's nothing comparable with the oak.
Right. We have
problems.
Phosphate inoculations for.
But they haven't worked as well. I mean, and they haven't stopped in any way the spread. And when you have so many trees and so forth, what can you do? I mean, the phosphates do to some extent, but it hasn't been thoroughly successful. And trees have remained sickly, and some have even died with those injections, continue to die.
Well, just to back up a second, I'm so happy to be sitting here with you. We don't have a guest here this time.
Yeah,
You know?
no, we don't.
Right. Well, we thought it would be nice to if you and I could sort of kick off the new year together, almost as if like a throwback to season 1.
And to reflect back on season 1 and in the midst of season 2.
Right.
So it's kind of a really cool stopping point, because we can look back at, we're midway through our new season, and we can reflect on having the guests, and we can talk about the guests that we want to have come. So I think it's a great opportunity, and it's a beautiful day. But it is nice just to sit and talk to you. What do you think some of the differences have been just having our guests?
Yeah. It's really opened up sort of the quality of our dialogue here, becoming a trilogue. The 3 legs now of our conversations open up the subject matter a little bit more. I mean, already you and I this morning went to our default mode of discussing your stories. We went back to the well, which I think, because we have the gracious support of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria, I think that's an entirely appropriate place to go. These stories that you steward in your work are the histories of the Southern Pomo and Coastal Miwok people, and that is very powerful evidence worthy of exploration, as much as, I don't know, empirical scientific evidence may be towards ethnobotanical, the mythopoetic landscape that we inhabit right now. We've had a lot of scientists on this show, and so we've really sort of geared towards a discussion of the empirical, of the archaeological, of the ecological, as opposed to, I believe, what your work specifically encapsulates, which is the narrative histories, which will lead us back to the traditional ecological knowledge, which so informs my work, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that bridge between you and I. So I'm of two minds about it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Because I do believe that the nature of our discourse is very specific in many productive ways, and while the third person might add to it, there's also a diffusion there as well.
Yeah, and then of course the focus has to be on the guest. You're hosting a guest.
Right.
I want to just jump back a little, because my work isn't just narrative. I mean, I write in a narrative form, but I do incorporate some science and stories and research.
Yeah.
And so much of my work is about a dialogue between those things, call it stories that my ancestors told me, science, and my reacquainting and keeping myself connected to one place, to this place. But it's a dialogue that I have with those things as I dialogue with the land. Mm-hmm. I use those things. All of these things must be integrated in a kind of mindset, because it is part of our mindset now. Perhaps I'm unique in some circles because of the older knowledge, or the older narrative stories, traditional stories, but that just makes our dialogue and my own writing, my work, broader and older, shall we say. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say deeper, because I don't want to privilege one type of knowledge over the other. But I think that ultimately there has to be, as Gregory Bateson said, a kind of ecology of mind going forward as we imagine a future that incorporates all of these kinds of thinking. And I think, and again, here I'm perhaps being a little optimistic or dreamlike, but I think that all of these things actually become mirrors reflecting one another. Yeah. Because as science is discovering what the Indian doctors used to see, the Indian medicine people would see and understand. again, I told you about Essie Parrish. When she would doctor a person, she would see with cancer, but she would see it as insect-like eggs hatching in a person's body. And when you put the virus under a microscope, that's what it looks like.
Right.
So, I mean, these things are coming together to remind us. It took a long time for science to kindly, post-enlightenment, where we're supposed to be rational and all that sort of thing. It took a while for it to double back on itself and say, hey, we are connected in one with the universe.
Yeah, right.
Which is science is saying, oh my gosh, look at the climate disaster. It's reminding us of the consequences of our behavior, that we're not alone, that we're not imperial, that we're a part of. And once we forget that, and assume dominance or over something else, we're just going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Science is telling us now that. The ancients been telling us that forever. But it's all coming together with, I think, a consistent message, Obi. And that's what you and I think, been trying to talk in different ways, that consistent message.
We could certainly intuit that interconnectedness. And I think that there is this deeper meaning to the nature of storytelling in general.
Yeah.
These powerful vehicles for the transmission of this information across consciousness, which is, you use the word viral, but I almost want to use a word like fungal.
Yeah.
Like it's propagation towards an integrative and undeniable truth. That perhaps, okay, so what am I talking about? I'm talking about the hubris of science in the sense that as we've known scientific progression over the past several centuries, it's been really limited to the human capacity to assimilate, collect, and analyze data. What's happening now, though, which I think is very exciting, on the precipice of this AI revolution, towards geometric increase in that ability to assimilate knowledge, I think what we're going to see is perhaps a greater focus on exactly what Essie Parrish was intimating there, in that as we understand, for example, fungal networks, how trees talk to each other. We've got invasive pathogenic fungal networks like the sudden oak death, but we've got within the biological dark matter of the earth, the way that trees communicate with each other, I think will inform ecology to such a degree that it will also inform physiological science.
But we got to be very careful here, because we cannot forget that those narratives that AI will generate itself have been shaped and formed by how and what we know and have dealt with data. It's our assemblage of data, not nature's.
Oh, not nature's, but the insight of understanding will be unlike any insight of understanding.
But then the question is, how do you experience that?
Yeah.
The question is, you can do a meta universe, you can do whatever, but it's not the same as sitting here. And it's not the same as understanding, for instance, how a human being would shapeshift into an animal, or these old ancient people. It's still a story. All we have is stories.
Okay.
But the important thing, that's the only thing we have as human beings, is stories. We can't fly. We're not, well, we figured out how to fly in a plane. But the thing that makes us human and able to pass on information, Obi, is language, our ability to speak.
Yeah.
But the ability to speak or think with data and knowledge is only one way of experiencing nature and life.
Yeah.
Because there are ways that can't be. It makes me think of what Flannery O'Connor, the great writer, said in one of her wonderfully wacky stories, Everything That Rises Must Converge, where you have this misfit Jesus-type character who's explaining to this woman that's trying to sell him her compromised daughter, mentally challenged daughter, take her away. But he says to her, and she gets into this whole thing about science, much like we're talking about. Right. This character in this story talks about science. And this misfit character with little education and a Jesus figure in the story says, lady, you can take the human heart, and a doctor can put it in his hand and cut it up into a million pieces and tell you how everything in that heart works. But it can never tell you about the heart.
Okay. Yes, you're right. I could see that. Oh, Flannery O'Connor's right. I could see that what is in effect is an emergent property from a complex system, and that emergent property is the heart. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole, right? The heart is more than those million pieces.
Yeah.
And could it be then that the story is an agent or a vehicle of assimilating complexity, right? Because there's so much in that word heart.
Well, they're saying, yes, it can, but remember, and here's the big danger, and one of the questions, like when we touched on AI last time, here's one of the big questions. Who's going to control the narrative? It's still somebody's narrative with all that information. So you can take that information, you're right, it's all assembled there. But who is going to propagate it and be the one that sets, if you will, that piece of information and the switch that says, present it this way? There's always going to be a switch.
Present it this way. Okay, so you're talking about community.
For instance, Obi, they'll be able to take the recording of you and I sitting here right now, and that's information. And they can tell you everything about Greg Sarris and Obi Kaufmann. They can go back and do the whole history. They can make me go back to 5 years old, age me to 110. They'll be able to do that. But they'll also be able to take me talking just as I'm talking now and saying, I love Donald Trump.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. So you'll have all that information, but the question will always be, as it's always been, what do you do with it?
Oh, well, let's go for broke then, because, okay, quote Shelley, poets are the unacknowledged adjudicators of the world, or something like that. The poets are the truth makers. I think what he was meaning there was that culture makers, right? What is the story we're telling? Like, why do I want to investigate the biological dark matter of the earth? Because I believe that therein are the secrets to restoring a baseline of pre-industrial restoration towards the biosphere. It's not Bezos and Musk trying to go to Mars. That's not going to quote unquote save humanity. I don't think that the truth is hidden. The truth of humanity's continued survival over the next 10,000 years is necessarily in the stars at all. In fact, it's about reinforcing the managing factors of Gaia across the biosphere that it's hidden in these systems of complexity, and this is almost like where I get like upset with the inability to reconcile the story of what we understand mycelial networks in the forest to actually be, how powerful life is on this planet to heal itself, right?
What, after we're gone?
No, right now. Right now.
So let's hold that thought, though. Let's hold that thought, because again, not to sound arrogant, but I certainly don't need science to know that.
Okay.
Okay, I don't. I believe it already.
Okay, so that's your word experience, and I get that. But I guess I'm talking about the application, right?
Yes, but then again, the question becomes, and this will bring us back to a question of politics and power. Who, with that knowledge, what do people do with it? And it will all come down to who has their finger on the switch. So you can tell 1 million people that were with science that were connected to 1 million things, but imagine, unless we elevate broadly human consciousness to know that we have to change the way we think about things, the majority of the world, and I would say the majority of the majority of the majority of politicians,
Right.
don't care. Their minds are in a different mindset than us, regardless of what you give them.
Okay, but you just presupposed that there's somehow a choice to be made. And I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I don't know if, like, minds change or forces change minds. Right?
Well,
like,
they haven't changed since the dawn, at least, of nation states, as far as we know.
well,
they haven't
depends
changed
on what
much.
scale we're talking about. I mean, there's plenty
Yeah.
of issues. I mean, you think about the golden age of environmental legislation. You know, these were minds changed in Congress in the early 70s that got the Clean Water Act passed, that got the Endangered Species Act passed, you know, that realized we have a problem. Our minds are being changed by this problem existing in the world.
And
Catastrophes on us. How do we adapt?
right. But I guess I'm a little cynical. Did you watch the debate last night?
Oh, God. No, I did not watch that.
Okay. Well, you should hear these folks who
I watched highlight reels, you know.
Okay.
And
well, when it came to the environment, both of them are saying innovation, we need to keep basically burning coal, and innovation will save us.
Okay.
And the truth of the matter is, again, if we want to be basic, we have to stop burning coal and fossil fuels now. But again, I'm old, and I've experienced how addicted this world is at several levels to materialism. And it's going to require, again, you mentioned a poet, and I've quoted him once before. Yeats have said, this pragmatic, preposterous pig of a world would vanish on the instant if the mind would but change its theme. And I think that I would feel more secure if there was more of a mind that was changing its theme. And I worry that with AI particularly, as people lose a sense of agency, they lean, traditionally we've seen this all along historically, look at what happened post-World War I. They lean towards a strong man. And I worry that there's governments that are, look what happened in Argentina. Look what's happening in a lot of places.
Yeah.
I don't want to be negative because I want to be positive, but I just want to be careful because I don't believe that science alone it can show us all that we need to know and remind us of the importance, and it can solve problems that we've created, for instance, environmentally and other ways, but otherwise. But I think we always have to be mindful that if you have generative AI, how that body, that mind, that thinking thing has come about was created by somebody or a group of people.
Yeah.
It was given the information, and it was given the information by humans, not by the trees.
Now
So I worry a little bit. I just worry. I mean, I think there's great opportunity. I mean, I'm thinking medically what AI can do. I mean,
Right.
that's going to be remarkable. And maybe, Obi, I can start to see some of what I think you're getting at, because once we see how AI can reduce medical costs and save lives and things like that, we can start seeing, again, we can start being comfortable and not frightened and all of that, or is power hungry. But I don't know. I deal with a lot of politicians, so I guess I get sometimes skeptical.
Well, it's interesting too. I can't help but think of. I'd like to go back to an indigenous critique of perhaps what AI might mean to the liberal lowercase l enlightenment, for example. The idea that there is self and there is community. Gosh, I really kind of thought this week a little bit on a point that's not brought up so much, but the algorithm of social media abscesses this word, this tendency that modern people have in Euro-American society to. I'm pausing on the word because I want it to land in a particularly dramatic way, but the word is tribalism. Like being tribal, entrenched in your beliefs, which is a word that I don't think means what they think it means, right?
Yeah.
As if it's like being tribal or being entrenched in tribal ideas is not something that benefits the largest possible people, which I think is the ethic.
And Obi, it's so interesting you mentioned that, because we must be on the same wavelength, because I was thinking lately a lot about tribalism.
Yeah.
And not to get too heady here, but really tribalism historically has been a precursor to nationalism. So the dangerous parts of tribalism. I think tribes of people should exist. I mean, we had a good model here. Let's just think of the model that was here. And there was skirmishes. I mean, as long as there's human consciousness, we're going to be paranoid, we're going to cheat, we're going to lie, we're going to do certain things. But a culture can also have checks and balances in it to keep those things from turning into disasters, to nuclear war, for example. So here what we had is we had different tribes. But you had tribes in area that had certain territories that they were responsible for maintaining. And if they didn't maintain those territories, the water in certain territories, the tribe in the next territory, which is sharing that water body, would not trade with them or would get mad. Mm-hmm. So the environment itself, the land itself, required that the different tribes work things out between them so that they could share the common place, the common land. And therefore, when you think about tribes in that way, Obi, it goes on forever. It could become a healthy map.
A healthy map. Oh, thank you. Yeah, as a cartographer.
Yes, there you go.
I mean, that's what
I threw that one at you and wasn't even thinking.
Thank you. I appreciate it because we've got the southern Pomo, Central Pomo, Northern Pomo, Eastern Pomo, Northeastern Pomo, Lake Pomo,
Southwestern Pomo,
yeah.
Kashaya, yeah.
Okay, very good. Now the Southern Pomo and the Coast Miwok, that's two different language roots.
As different as English is from Urdu or Cantonese. It's a completely different language family. And in Pomo, there's so many variations. And in Coast Miwok, there's not quite as many. And they're the three variations that we know of are pretty similar. But imagine in the old days, those people spoke easily 5 different languages, sometimes 10. Many of those as different as, again, English is from Urdu, but they could communicate. It was necessary. They took time to learn different languages, trade stories. In fact, now, interestingly enough, we're having debates sometimes with tribes and other tribes saying, well, is this Pomo territory or is this Coast Miwok? Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, the ethnographers recorded Coast Miwok using Coast Miwok names for the villages, but then the Pomo had Pomo names for the same villages.
I see. Oh, that's not confusing.
Yes. So whose actual land was it? And ultimately, I don't think it mattered. But somehow now it matters to us because we get all concerned about territory and nation, and suddenly tribal has become something about people being armed rather than people being connected and celebrating those connections.
Well, that's a whole new strata of the land back argument, isn't
Yeah,
it? Like,
yeah.
what? Okay, so what? The land back argument, a critique of the land back argument, might be that it exists inside of a Euro-American sense of property,
Right.
private property,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As opposed to that question, which might be off in a storytelling sense. That question, whose land is it? Well, it's the land's land.
Yeah,
isn't it?
ownership was a completely foreign concept to us. Ownership was a completely we had territories that we were responsible for and that kept us alive and fed us. And of course, if those were threatened, we'd get into trouble or have issues with that. But it wasn't that the land was something we would make money off of and more money off of and need to own it to make money and keep other people away. It was something to take care of, to feed us, and make sure that our only job really was to make sure could continue to take care of that land. So if we were threatened by another people, it wasn't even about us. It was all about the whole place.
The whole place, Greg. You know, I'm writing this next book on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm astounded by how integral the quality and force that is fire on the land has informed every aspect of the living earth of California.
And
For
certain
tens of
pines
thousands of
and
years.
trees, they wouldn't grow if we weren't burning.
Right. But I have an idea I'd like to throw past you. You know, hanging out with you, hanging out with others in the living native California community, where the attitude towards possessions,
Yeah.
right? You know, there's woefully, like, I mean, much to archaeologists' sort of consternation, there's not a lot across the California floristic province of this incredibly sophisticated culture that existed for millennia after millennia, right? Because that has to do with the attitude of the people towards the people of California, much different than like the people of like the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, yeah.
They had a much different attitude towards material property.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder how much of even that is based on a meditation of burning. Right?
That's interesting. Well, yeah, because I
There's
don't know.
There was
When
so much
yeah.
fire. There's so much fire. That's the thing. It's like I'm not talking about like it was a completely different relationship to fire
Yeah.
than the modern Californian might feel like sort of this mix between horror and trauma.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what fire represents.
Yeah.
Because we know, especially in the last 20 years, this incredible colonial conflagration, really, you know, that has sort of conspired to create a mega fire environment like California hasn't seen since something like the Altitherm, like thousands of years ago when California was much warmer than it is today.
Yeah.
Like your ancestors, when they watched San Francisco Bay fill,
Yeah.
It was 3 degrees Celsius on average warmer per year in California than it is now.
Yeah.
You know, and there was like centuries-long droughts within the Altitherm.
Yeah.
And yet, all of those throughout all of those droughts, California seems to have retained its entire biodiverse portfolio.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Isn't
It's
it?
one of the rarest things
Didn't lose
on the
anything.
planet.
Yeah.
Over these millennium.
Right.
Well, you know, when you talk about meditating on fire, a couple things really come to mind, and that is, of course, as a child, we say playing with fire. We knew. I mean, when you're burning something and burning the landscape, it's such a delicate and dangerous kind of process because, again, you have to know when it won't get out of control because that fire, in fact, could kill you. In fact, fire in many ways was the most powerful thing we had because out of control, you die. In control, you live. And the land gets richer for it when it is in control. So you can anticipate it being out of control by burning, so that should lightning or something hit, you're not going to have the massive fires that
Right.
you would otherwise have.
Right.
Right? So again, you're right, Obi, because fire was, I would imagine, as I like to say, I wasn't back there then, I'm not that old, but I would imagine that the sense of fire was ever present. The other thing, Obi, is that fire was essential in a village to keep big predators, bears and mountain lions, from coming in and eating girls who are menstruating. That's why we kept them in the center of the village, because those predators smell blood, right? So the fire was the thing that
The
also...
menstrual building was like one of the regular pieces of
yes.
architecture in the village, right?
More centrally located, so that there were fires in different places around it. So you remember those animals are afraid of fire. They won't generally come on, and if you're burning something, they're not going to step in it or come around it.
Yeah.
So fire was so.
So that's the fire from out, from in to out. There's also fire as a hunting technique. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Fire, of course, by burning and stuff, you kept the open grassland. So the proliferation of all the pronghorn and elk and everything else that was here.
Rabbits, a lot of rabbits. That's what Margolin talks about in The Alone Way.
Oh, rabbits.
So many rabbits.
Well, yeah, that's why we made so many pelts. Everybody said, well, why do the Indians, so many of their blankets and things were rabbits? They had to sew them together. Well, we were killing and eating more of them than we were the bigger animals. So we trapped them. I mean, because they were all around. But the other thing about fire, it reminds you of life itself, how it comes and it goes. And even as I'm thinking of fire,
the psychological,
the psychological notion of
landscape,
death, of landscape and transformation, you're constantly cognizant of that. I could sit here and be all worried about my property and get all pissed about it or whatever if I would. But Obi, everything we're seeing right now is going to be here after I'm gone in one way or another. All I can do in my brief moment here on living here and taking care of this and in my life is take care of it the best way I can. And that's a humbling thing, because that's really small, but you do it.
And you got to let it take care of you too, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of your point with your story. One of the many points that you made in that story from your latest book, Becoming Story, which is what if Oprah was an oak tree? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have this oak tree in front of your house that you estimate is about 300 years old.
Yeah.
Is it black oak, yeah? Or is it live oak?
It's live oak.
Live oak,
Yeah.
so they go 400, 500 years.
Yeah.
So it's seen some stuff,
and it's been chopped up. It's like I look at an older person like the Bays. They have some scars from surgeries, fires, and those kinds of things. And some of I've cut it and tried to keep it, but it's like an older person who's had some surgeries, but they're still going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of there's a great many paradoxes about fire, and a paradox in this sense is like some sort of absurd truth or some sort of absurdity that reveals some sort of truth. Like, for example, the more fire you have, the less fire you have.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying.
Yeah.
You do the controlled burns,
right,
that'll keep you from having a massive fire that you can't control, too much fire.
Right.
So you keep burning to avoid the bigger fire,
right,
smaller fires to avoid the huge thing that would destroy much life.
Right. There's a lot of talk about fire restoration in terms of good fire and bad fire, and there's a lot of a counterbalancing argument to that as well, which is the need for mixed severity fire. There's a lot of evidence for megafire back in the day as well. A lot more in chaparral environments than coniferous forests.
Yeah.
Okay. But and what kind of are we talking about? A coastal redwood forest? Or are we talking about a mixed conifer forest from in the Sierra Nevada, which is a totally different thing? There's so much evidence that this sort of pyrogenic cultivation across the western slope of the Sierra Nevada was really did a number of things, including like propagating sugar pines over big expansive trees, and it looks like trees back then were on average about 20% larger because they had more space because of the open space that fire afforded.
Yes.
Right.
And
then
the nutrients that fired.
The nutrients, right? The fertilizer,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You open the space, and that there are some trees like the fir trees, the red fir and the white fir, that are really good at colonizing in the shade.
Yeah.
So they're a shade tolerant sapling, right? Yeah. So you want to get rid of that.
They kind of creep in and keep creeping.
Keep your meadows, keep your meadows, keep your beavers. Well, see what I'm describing here is a mosaic. We need all of this stuff. It's not just about good fire and bad fire. It's not just about low intensity, but you also need high severity sometimes.
Unfortunately, given the way the state's populated, I don't think we can do that anymore. So the high severity. I mean, I can't. That I think we're kind of hamstrung there.
Yeah.
So that's something we can't do. But again, I think
I can't really speak to that. Like, exactly like what we're gonna do, how it's gonna work out. It's like I go back to Mabel McKay sometimes when I'm feeling most desperate. When her prophecy. Her prophecy when she said, "My latest dream is that it's all going to burn."
Yeah.
And isn't that...
She said it's going to heat up. It's going to get hot. Everything's going to go dry, she said.
Everything's going to go dry.
And then it's going to burn.
But
she also, the interesting thing, I was just thinking of Abel before you said that. We're on some kind of interesting wavelength today, Obi. But
I bet it's fungal in nature.
I'll take it, Obi. Call it what you will, it's working. So that's the main thing if it works, okay?
Yes, indeed.
So, but Mabel always talked about fire like everything else as cleansing. It's going to clean. It's going to be cleansed. Everything's going to be cleansed. That's what she would always say. And cleansed is a way of, again, us cleaning to start over and renew.
Right.
And she saw that as even in a doctoring ceremony or in an epic kind of way of fire cleaning everything.
Release.
Really, yeah.
Which is a meditation on death, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, the world over, the Jungian
That was in my astrology today, that word release. I just happened to look at it because, I'm a news junkie, and so I go everything. And I think the Washington Post now is doing astrology of all crazy things, or not so crazy things. I don't want to put down people, astrologers, but
I think it depends on the quality of the writer.
There you go. I like that, Obi. That's a great one. Yeah, if you can write well at whatever it is, I'll read it. I'll even believe it.
Exactly.
But if it's well written, it's got to be true.
Whether or not like astrology has like objective truth, which I can't go there. I don't really even know that much about astrology, because I don't really understand it. But what I do understand is that when you're scanning the page, what you're gleaning there is like a moment of creativity.
Yeah.
That it stands in
story.
contrast to
A story.
to the rote journalism, for example. Right?
So anyway, release was in these 3 lines for, I'm an Aquarius, something today is your day to release. So don't scare me. That means, of course, I could die. But the way we're talking.
Right.
But I want to stay around a little. I got a few more things I think I need to do. But anyway, so release, the whole idea of release going on. And, when strangely, when you think about death, no matter how you believe or what you believe, one thing's for certain, the ego won't exist as it has.
After death. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We may be a million different places, but we won't be the ego that holds us together. It will be us without that controlling self-conscious force.
Mm-hmm. Well, life is the thing that burns. We burn.
Yeah.
We burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that rings true to me. This. I mean, it's so complete that I think of like, the Platonic elements of earth, air, fire, and water as they're applied to the sphere of the globe. We've got the atmosphere, we've got the lithosphere, the geosphere, we've got the hydrosphere, or hydrology. The pyrosphere doesn't really exist. We've got the biosphere.
Right.
And the biosphere is that which burns.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, fire is endemic to this planet as far as we understand.
As is
Combustion fire.
regeneration.
As is regeneration.
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
as far as life is concerned.
Yeah.
The cleaning agent. As death as the cleaning agent, the burning of the healing of Oprah the oak tree, rewarded by the bounty of acorns, perhaps the healthy, resilient, right? That's what it is.
Yeah.
A tempering of resiliency within the tree body itself.
Yeah.
Towards desiccation, towards aridity. It almost seems like our forests are young.
Yeah.
Our forests are stressed because of overcrowded, and infirmed because of invasive
species,
invasive flora,
and even the native flora that hasn't been taken care of
fungus.
in the old way, i.e., burned away and stuff.
Oh, isn't that the case?
Yeah.
I mean, does this? I mean, I understand that you exist within this infrastructural modern community that is the Great Rancheria and the casino, and one of your great efforts is the building of the Grayton Farm across the street from the casino, right?
Yeah.
To feed the elders.
Yeah.
The diversity. One of the great things we have here, speaking again to soil fecundity and fungal propagation.
Yes.
That's right.
See, I'm with you, Obi. Don't worry, I get it.
Nutrient vectors. I wonder to what degree that influences your thinking as chairman, as like, what are we doing with the landscape? You've got this one priority to get vegetables to the old people, right?
Yeah.
But is there sort of traditional ecological knowledge on the horizon?
We're planting a lot of, but I say we are planting a lot of the native plants and so forth. But it's an interesting paradox, and you have to be very aware, which many of our friends who have money and our movie stars who advocate for the environment, there's a huge, as I've said, used the term before, cognitive dissonance, Obi, where people can be all for the environment and doing all kinds of things, and yet they're flying all over the place, they're buying more land, they're doing all these kinds of things. And this is part of, I'm operating or overseeing a huge casino resort where people are gambling, where people are driving cars. Yeah. But I'm aware of what that is doing. At least I'm connected to it, and I can begin to shape it in ways and implode the sickness from the inside. So I'm using that model to use the model to share with other people, to use the money for the environment, so I can see the damage I'm doing to do that, at the same time, hopefully creating from the ashes of that fire that I've kind of burned, from the ashes, regenerate a new world. That may be extremely idealistic, but I think too often, unless we really see the contradictions, Oprah was all for higher consciousness, or Oprah Sundays and all of that sort of stuff. But there's, again, typical her shows, what was being advertised on the shows were so dangerous for the environment and were contradictory to so much of what she was about, as is all the diplomats and rich people going to COP28, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not that I'm condemning them, but to what extent are we being blind and not seeing this huge cognitive dissonance between what we think we're doing and what we're actually doing?
Well, I see. I really applaud your ability to exist in different worlds like that. You've got a new book coming out. The Forgetter's Tales will be here in April.
April,
is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to plan something about that. As we wind down here in our first episode of January, I want to say that our Place and Purpose giveaway winner this month is Mimi Robinson from Daly City.
Oh, how cool, Mimi!
Yeah, so that is
I called my grandmother Mimi.
Mimi. Oh, is that right?
Yes.
My nieces call their grandmother Mimi.
Yeah.
So I think that. I don't know if it's like this for you, but for me, just a sort of ending note, the creativity, engaging my creativity is the only way. And I think this is a common experience, to fight despair about whatever subject, to approach that despair from a creative side, or just to be creative in general as a changer of mind.
Yeah, Obi, and I absolutely agree. And if I had my ways, and as I had planned my life, that's all I wanted to do, was to teach and be a creative. But of course, the opportunity or the demand to help my people who didn't have the luxury to do these things, I felt compelled I had to do something. It was there, and I couldn't just say, okay, well, I'm going to create, and, I'm not going to help you or help others. And, of course, it turned into this big thing. But you're absolutely right. And I have to admit, and I'll tell you and everybody listening, that writing and reading is the healthiest thing for my mind. It's the most creative thing, and it is the thing that enables me to go out and negotiate this huge cognitive dissonance between a casino and a garden and all those kinds of things. Wonderful. It's I couldn't do it if I did. And the extent to which I'm not creating, Ovi, I start to feel not well. So keep creating, Obi. I think that, and then look at what you're creating. You're creating these fantastic almanacs that remind us in detail of these beautiful environments, and now of fire, the life of fire. I'm calling it the life of fire on this land.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Greg, for meeting with me. Always a highlight and a still point in a world that seems to be more rapid.
And we forgot to talk about the cougar. We'll do that next time. Hey, everybody. Next time, we'll talk about a cougar that keeps coming back here every night whistling.
Okay.
Right?
I'll remind you about it. All righty.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Have
Obi.
a wonderful day.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.